When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Comms YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be talking about episode 3, and specifically, I just want to talk about why did they change this moment from the book where Rhaenyra and Alicent have a conversation early on in the war, or even really before the war has truly started. I want to talk about why they decided to do that, why that could be detrimental, and what are my overall thoughts on the change of Alicent Hightower and Rhaenyra having this conversation with her sneaking to the Sept. But before we do, if you do want to become a Patreon or a member, you do get videos early, and also my House of the Dragon full reviews are for those people. And I want to say a thank you to the people that support me on this channel as well. So let's get into it. So let's kind of deep dive into this. For the first part of it, why change this? Why have this moment here, right? Why isn't it in any other episode, right? Well, let's think about the episodes that we know are going to happen for at least the first half of the season. Episode 1, you end on blood and cheese, a huge cliffhanger. I think it's probably a top 3 moment of this time period. It unfortunately was not as good as it could have been, but still, one of the biggest moments. It worked really well with casual audience specifically. Episode 2, you have the Cargill twin fight, another big moment of the dance. It's a huge, big, emotional moment. Okay. Episode 3. What do you have? Like, there's no moment that you kind of equal out to being of the quality of the other two. I would argue that Daemon's Harrenhal stuff would be the stuff that I think was the highest of this episode, but maybe they didn't think that. Maybe they didn't think that was enough, and I, disagree with them. I thought Harrenhal is where this episode should have ended, but that's not what they thought. So, okay, let's look at episode 4. You have Rook's Rest, more than likely is what the event of that episode's going to be. So when you're looking at these episodes, you're going and you're sitting here and you're thinking, okay, if you're Ryan Connell, if you're the writing team, you're thinking maybe we need to put in one of these emotional moments, a big cliffhanger, something big for this episode because it's kind of the black sheep of the family. It doesn't have that huge big moment, even though I would argue it already did, and they kind of screwed up it in the editing, right? The Alice Rivers and Daemon plot where he's having these visions and these big reveals to us, the audience, about what he's thinking and that he may die here in Harrenhal. That's what should have been the ending, right? It's a great place to end the episode, but they decided to go with Alicent and Rhaenyra meeting up. And that's not to say that this wasn't foreshadowed, right? There's been plenty of times where we've seen the two characters still have a relationship, that there is something there that just was not resolved. And so I was sitting here believing, okay, they were setting that up for, later episodes, right? Or a certain event that could happen in the future. If you're a book reader, you know what I'm alluding to, and I'm trying to keep this spoiler free. So when we're looking at this moment, you're sitting here and you're going, okay, it has been built up to, so how do we actually execute this? And this is where it falls flat, because the conversation itself is a very interesting conversation. It's an emotional connection that reveals certain things to both characters. But the issue is, one, the execution's just bad. It's just terrible. The idea that Daemon sneaks into King's Landing, which is already the worst part of episode 1, then happens again with Rhaenyra. Now, it's done a little better because Rhaenyra actually has like an outfit on and there's some sort of planning going along here outside of just Daemon just walking into the castle. Okay, but here's the issue. Rhaenyra is not Daemon. Rhaenyra is never been shown to be like this idiotic, this stupid, right? Where she's going to put herself in harm's risk. Think about what her plan is. Her plan is, I'm going to threaten Alicent's life if she doesn't let me go or whatever. Like, can you imagine any situation where Rhaenyra is seen, or whether she is, killed based upon Alicent just letting Rhaenyra walk a couple steps and then the guards killing her or capturing her? And some have argued, well, Alicent would never do that. But I kind of disagree, right? Like, Alicent's done quite a lot of bad things, especially towards Rhaenyra. I think if I'm Alicent in that situation, I'm sitting here going, okay, a war is going to happen. I have the queen right there in my hands, and I decided to not get her? Like, what? And even if she's worrying about her life or this or that, like, let her go for like 10 minutes and then just seal the whole castle. That simple. Seal the city. Nobody gets out. it's just one of those things where it's so contrived that I get why they wanted to do it. It's just, it felt like they had the end moment, but didn't know how to get to it, right? They had the moment that they wanted in their head, they just didn't know how to get there. And so at this point of the video, I'm going to get into spoilers because I think it's important to understand why I think this event was so bad. So for if you've not, read the story, you don't know what happens here, I would definitely take a break as I'm going to talk about some spoilers here. So at this time, we, for book readers, know that Rhaenyra and Alicent do end up meeting again. They meet up when Rhaenyra takes King's Landing. So why then put this moment here? Because if you really think about it, Rhaenyra and Alicent have only been apart for like half a season, right? Only 5 episodes, right? The very kind of end or beginning of episode 9 to the very end of episode 5, or an end of episode 3 in season 2. So you didn't really give your characters that much time to breathe. They haven't grown a tremendous amount yet, right? Rhaenyra still feels somewhat like the Rhaenyra of, the first season, right? She hasn't really started to get into that fiery side of herself. We started to see it in episode 2, and then episode 3, it's not really as present. It's her being cautious, trying to save her children and getting everyone away from danger and all these things. And so when you have this moment with Rhaenyra and Alicent, it just doesn't feel right. It just feels off because the characters haven't been apart for that long, right? So now when we get to this moment with King's Landing, when Rhaenyra takes it, the moment that should have been so impactful between Rhaenyra and Alicent is kind of not there anymore, because you're going to sit in here and look at this conversation, which should have been actually in that episode, because think about how much more impactful that would have been if we get to, the end of season 2 or the very beginning of season 3, or, anywhere in that range, and it's Alicent and Rhaenyra talking about all these tragic events that have happened, the countless lives that have been lost. And so, they think back and they're like, this could have been avoided, right? This all could have been avoided. It would have been the irony of that situation. It would have been perfectly what George would have written into like this kind of a situation. But it doesn't happen. It just kind of serves the purpose of Rhaenyra realizing that maybe action is the way now, or there is no chance of peace with Alicent. And maybe Alicent having more guilt, which is like Alicent already has a bunch of guilt. This adds to it, sure, but you already had enough there. You didn't need to sacrifice the plot and logistics of the show to give her that. Rhaenyra also should not be stupid. Look at the actions going on, right? Aegon sent somebody to assassinate you. Literally, I don't know if a day has passed or maybe 2 days has passed between Alicent and Rhaenyra talking. I find it hard to believe that Rhaenyra would just look past the fact that Otto Hightower is no longer the king's hand. Aegon and Criston Cole seem to be acting now. Criston Cole was just spotted leading a host out of King's Landing. War is happening. What do you think Alicent's going to be really able to do? Now, Rhaenyra doesn't know Alicent's exact influence over Aegon, and that's wavering heavily at this time. So it just becomes a mute point, because it feels like both outcomes for both characters, Alicent and Rhaenyra, what it's going to impact them going forward, still happens even if this moment doesn't happen. And so you lose any of kind of that weight to this moment because of that. And so you take away something that would have been so good later on in the show and put it here because a number of reasons. One, you felt like you needed a bigger moment for the episode, which fell flat. 2, you didn't have a lot for Alicent and Rhaenyra to do in this episode. There wasn't a lot for them to do. From the source material, Alicent does not do that much after this part of it, right? It's her kind of setting up the war, and then she kind of takes a back seat. Rhaenyra is in this position where she's still not wanting to act. So it's kind of building on this very cautious, I don't want to put my sons in harm's way or my family in harm's way, and that's going to have repercussions. And so they just couldn't be patient. They couldn't let the characters build and then come back to each other. So it feels like the best analogy I can use for this is don't foreshadow a big moment in like episode 1 and then do it in like episode 5 when it's too early, right? For instance, like the Red Wedding. And the Red Wedding is an event that was, foreshadowed and built upon from the first season to then season 3. That's kind of where I felt like this should have been. It should have been allowed to grow, right? it should have been allowed for the two to grow their resentment towards the other. And when you come back and it's all for this misunderstanding, it plays that in exactly to what Rhaenys says. Rhaenys talking about when was this moment that, both sides justify, this war happening or all these things. And that is something that like Alicent and Rhaenyra were reflected on, right? Back in this moment where Alicent thinks that Viserys is talking about Aegon, her son, still a plot I don't like. It doesn't help that a plot line I didn't like in the very end of episode 8 and then into episode 9 also was part of this conversation. I didn't really like that, but I do think they kind of handled it well between the two characters. I just wish it wouldn't have been here and it executed better. But yeah, that is, in my opinion, the rationale of why they put this moment here. I think it's, if you can't tell, I think it's a pretty bad moment of this. It's probably the worst moment of the season. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. If I'm wrong, let me know. I'd like to hear differing opinions on this because maybe some people have different takes. I'd love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments. Please be civil, of course. I'll see you guys in the next video. Hopefully episode 4 improves off of episode 3. It laid a foundation for some things to really blossom in the next episode. So I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.